roster construction, talent evaluation, and overall philosophies. That's some of the highlights of what we learned from assistant GM Brian Stark. We'll talk about that, plus more on Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for August 20th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. Show continues to grow each and every day because of your consistent support and the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day on the YouTube page. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. Does fine work. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. And as you can imagine, man, a lot of great feedback based off conversations we had on Tuesday, based off the game on Saturday against the 49ers, based on the game coming up on Saturday against the Cardinals. A lot of great feedback, calls, texts. We'll get as many in as possible as we close out the show. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Segment number 2, there was a big move that happened that was kind of expected, but it became official on Tuesday in Indianapolis, and that's the fact that Daniel Jones will get the start at the quarterback position, where former first-round pick, number 4 overall, Anthony Richardson, will be the backup quarterback, and he's going into year 3. So there's some speculation, there's some conversation. Should the Raiders show interest in the QB? And how much does what Pete Carroll had to say about him after the 2023 draft, how much will that play a factor? We'll talk about that. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and it really is built around what assistant GM Brian Stark had to say to us Tuesday at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Off top, the Raiders will be back at practice today. It's going to be an early practice today, 8:45 a.m. to 10:45, where Tuesdays was 10 a.m. to about 12:15-ish or so. But 8:45 a.m., 10:45, it's going to be back outdoors. It's going to be hot outside. That's why they're going a little bit early, but that's cool, right? That's what they do. There's only a few more of these that we're going to be able to be in full attendance for. Once the training camp session and period is over, then it's just be a very small window where the media is allowed to be there. So really appreciate the time that we're able to be out at practice. We'll also get to talk to head coach Pete Carroll and a few players following practice. And luckily, I've been able to get one-on-one conversations with a player or two following practice each and every day. So I definitely appreciate the Raiders for that. But if you want to hear from the head coach, Pete Carroll, 10:45-ish is about the time that he will go live from the podium outside at the training facility. So now let's go ahead and jump right into what assistant GM Brian Stark, some of the highlights from his conversation. For me, it was the first time getting a chance to talk to him. A couple of other media members have had a chance to talk to him before, but it hasn't been very long that he's even been part of the organization. So get a chance to catch up with him, especially a week like this week where they're going into the last preseason game, and roster cutdowns are coming up. Matter of fact, next Tuesday by 1 p.m. Pacific time, they have to have the roster trimmed down from 90 to 53, and they'll have their practice squad as well. So great timing. Really a great opportunity to be able to talk to the assistant GM and just, get some philosophy, some roster construction, and just overall thoughts from him. So I started things off talking about the collaboration. How is it going between GM John Spytek, head coach Pete Carroll, and, of course, Brian Stark, the assistant GM.
Brian Q. Myers from Raider Nation Radio 920. What is the collaboration like, especially this time of year when you're getting ready down to roster cut downs between you, Spytek, Pete Carroll, just that collaboration?
Yeah, it's been very collaborative so far. Coach Carroll and Spy, they talk daily on everything. We have meetings where, everyone is encouraged to kind of share their views. We watch the practice film together as a personnel staff. We have conversations. We have a chance to interact with the coaches and kind of hear their feel so that we kind of understand, maybe what we're asking certain players, certain positions to do. And then there's just a lot of conversation, in both departments. And then, Spy and, Coach Carroll, they come together and, we're just trying to create all the information, get all the different perspectives on players, and then kind of narrow the focus and give those guys the right information so that when it's time to make a decision, that they can make the decision that's best for us.
So there's Brian Stark right there. And look, he's known John Spytek for a long time. They were in Denver together. Stark has been in the NFL for a very long time, but hasn't been with the organization for a long time. He didn't come aboard with the Raiders till after the draft, so everything was already set in stone with what they were going to do with the draft. But you see, as you mentioned, you heard him mention that everyone shares their views, coaches, everyone involved, right? Assistant GM, head coach, and they're going to do their very best to come up with this 53-man roster. And obviously they'll be combing the waiver wire as well. So here's Brian Stark. He was asked about a potential position group that might be tougher to make a decision on. And it's funny that this question was asked to him by Adam Hill from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Does a fantastic job because it's something that I talked about on my radio show on Tuesday as well. And at first I thought that, this is going to be easy. But as I started to go through it and try to decide how many running backs or how many tight ends or how many wide receivers they're going to keep, I realized it was a little bit tougher of a job than I initially thought. But what did Brian Stark think about the question that Adam Hill poses to him?
Maybe a position group that you think you might have the biggest challenge next week in trying to make in terms of making a decision.
I don't think there's a single position group like that. I think the whole roster it's really competitive right now. So I think, every position for those last couple of spots, there's a lot of competition for it, and we kind of take the opportunity to evaluate every exposure. So every practice, every game that we have from now until cutdown day is important for us. We want to see and provide as many opportunities for each of those players to compete as we can. So it's hard to single out one position group, but I can tell you that the competition for those roster spots on the back end there, it's going to go right down to the wire.
So he said the whole roster. And again, at first I kind of thought can't really be the whole roster. But man, let me tell you, we're all putting together our 53-man roster right now. That's kind of what we'll do. And I'll roll mine out here on the show a little bit later, probably after preseason game number 3 on Saturday, probably on Monday's show. I already have it right here, boom, boom. I already haven't, but I could, I might change it, right? Depending on what happens on Saturday, I might slip a guy in there or take a guy out, whatever the case may be. It's not as easy as it may sound. And the running backs, defensive line, O-line, cornerback, tight end, even wide receiver, all those position groups I went back and forth on a few times. So he's talking about the whole roster. I absolutely understand why he's talking about the whole roster. And then I asked him another question about, you're evaluating your team, right? You're trying to get down to the 53-man roster, but look, there's 31 other teams to monitor, right? And when guys get released and they try to slide through waivers and maybe get put onto their other teams' practice squads, right? Are they paying attention, and how are they paying attention and evaluating that? And then a follow-up just about specific teams if there's something to focus on.
We talk about the evaluations of looking at your own roster, but there's also 31 other teams that are going to be cutting down rosters as well. How do you kind of not spread it too thin, but be able to evaluate who's out there available as well?
Yeah, we have a process for that. Again, Brandon Hunt and Ben Chester and the pro staff, we kind of break up the teams, and everybody's assigned different teams, and we've got an eye on all those preseason games as they come in, and constantly kind of monitoring all those situations, because our goal is to put the best roster we can. So we're going to explore every option there is. Starts with knowing our roster first to understand where our strengths and deficiencies are, or where we think we can get better. But, I was taught early in my career that the most important evaluation is self-evaluation. So we start here, we spend a lot of our time here, but we also, exhaust every resource we can to kind of see what we think potentially could be available.
Real quick follow-up, is there any kind of emphasis on maybe looking at a team where you feel like, hey, they draft really well? They always bring in really talented players. Let's focus in on them to see who they might let go.
Yeah, we try to spend. We focus the same amount of detail on every potential claim or every roster. But naturally, you recognize there's certain teams that maybe you agree with their philosophy or it aligns a little closer with what yours is. And some teams are deeper than others, so you have ideas on that. But it's all kind of speculation right now, because a lot of things happen. Even in this last week of the preseason, things change quickly. So we kind of have to keep that focus wide right now to make sure we're kind of collecting everything, and it'll start to focus up and narrow as the weekend goes on.
Great details right there from assistant GM Brian Stark, I thought, right? And look, He said everyone is assigned to a team. That's wild, right? I mean, to know that there's 31 teams in the league besides the Raiders, right, that everyone has a specific team that they just got to focus in on. All right, you pay attention to what the Broncos are doing. You pay attention to what the Chiefs are doing. You pay attention to what the Chargers are doing, and so on and so forth. And then they've got to come back and they've got to, have the answers. And, hey, this is a guy that we looked at in the draft, or this is a guy that, we've already had in the organization before, or we worked with at some other place, and we really like what he brings to the table. And the reason I asked about the specific teams is because I do think there are a few teams in the league that have really sharp front offices. I've talked about that for quite a while here on the show. Philly is one of them. Obviously, the Raiders have already made a trade with them when they went and got Thomas Booker IV. They have guys from Philly in the organization. I think the Cowboys do a good job. Will McClay, I think he does a really good job with his evaluation. I don't think he gets enough credit. Baltimore, I've always given them a lot of credit. Tampa Bay, Jason Light, what he does. Seattle, they all really have some good organizations, and you see some really good talent come through those walls. Now, once you get the talent in the building, that's on you to develop them. Every team that I mentioned doesn't do the same, but those are some of the teams that I really look at and say, okay, they know what they're doing. They're doing it right. And hopefully the Raiders are one of those organizations that end up being put in that conversation where other teams are looking at like, man, we got to do what the Raiders do. That would be nice to see the Raiders get there. I think John Spytek is the right guy for the job, coming from that Tampa Bay tree with Jason Light as the GM. So I think he's going to be that guy. But obviously, you've got to be able to put together multiple drafts and, do really well as far as talent evaluation and acquisition to be able to consider that. Final soundbite that I have for you from Brian Stark, the assistant GM, got to meet with him on Tuesday at the Intermountain Health Performance Center, has to do with analytics. Our guy Jesse Merrick actually asked this question, and I always wonder about this because it's like analytics versus the eye test versus analytics. So here's the question asked to assistant GM Brian Stark about analytics.
Kind of talking about analytics there, and compiling all that data. How do you go about marrying that with the good old-fashioned eye test of trusting what you see? What's that balance like between putting those together?
Yeah, I think, so I coached for a while, and, analytics wasn't as big of a part of it then when I was doing that. So, naturally I was always kind of an eye test guy, but there's so much information available and it's so much more efficiently evaluated. And, the applications for it are almost endless. We've got a great team upstairs. They go through so much information that it would take us days to do, and they do it in minutes, and then really refine the presentation. So I think the analytics stuff, one, it's great for maybe identifying people that maybe are over or undervalued. It's also great for, it is a collaborative process here. There's a lot of conversation about player. It also is great about creating conversations on players that maybe we go over too quickly, and identifying targets that maybe we're not focusing on enough. So it's just another piece of that puzzle. I would say that that's something in the last several years that I've really grown to appreciate, and it can be a valuable tool, absolutely.
Again, I thought that was a great question. I always wonder about the balance. I always say I'm not a big analytics guy. I know some people that they live and die by analytics. It's all about PFF, and whatever PFF says is gospel. I'm always a guy that uses it for reference. I think it's good, but being able to collect as much information, gather as much information as possible, now that's a good thing, right? And the other thing is having the information, but what do you do with the information, right? I mean, the Raiders have used analytics before in the past. Hell, they used analytics last year, but they just didn't use them, or they didn't use them correctly, right? And I remember the guy that was in charge of analytics for in-game situations. They said he was great. He was money Monday through Saturday, but then when it came game time on Sunday, he kind of froze up and didn't have the analytical answers that he was supposed to. So that's an issue as well. But apparently everyone that they have in the analytics side of things in this Raiders organization now is really sharp, and Pete Carroll is open to using it, where at first he wasn't really open to analytics, but now he is. So just being able to evolve as a head coach and be able to evolve as an organization, I think makes a lot of sense. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Again, just a few of the highlights from the conversation that we had about 25 minutes or so with assistant GM Brian Stark at the Intermountain Health Performance Center on Tuesday. But on Tuesday, with helping in Indianapolis, Daniel Jones was named the starting quarterback. Anthony Richardson, right? First round pick. He's the backup. Should the Raiders make a move for him? We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. We'll break it down in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to let you know that this episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. So many shows are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. And right now, Yahoo Fantasy celebrating 28 years of fantasy football greatness. How are they doing that? Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a great new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. And if you're into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more great announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the conversation about Anthony Richardson, former first-round pick selected by the Indianapolis Colts, number 4 overall in 2023. The fact that, once again, he is not the starting quarterback in Indianapolis. He is now the backup quarterback. Indianapolis, Shane Steichen, the head coach, made that decision official on Tuesday. Now, first of all, it shouldn't have been a big surprise. Daniel Jones decided to sign a 1-year, $14 million deal with the Colts as a free agent, which already told me that, and that was during free agency, that, you know, there's a good chance he was going to be the starting quarterback. Well, on Tuesday, they made that official. And the reason I'm bringing this to the table is because, well, what Pete Carroll said about Anthony Richardson following the 2023 draft when Pete Carroll was still a part of the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the other thing about this is I've also been hit up by multiple people, texts, tweets, whatever the case may be, calls. Hey, Q, should the Raiders take a look at Anthony Richardson? Hey, Q, should the Raiders send Aiden O'Connell and trade him for Anthony Richardson? And I say no. And this is why. But this is what Pete Carroll said on Seattle Sports Radio after the 2023 draft. They asked if he had considered making the move for Richardson, and Pete said, and I quote, "We considered him. Shoot, we flew all the way out there to see him. Not just to see him, but to be around him and watch him and how he handled himself. And then his program with all the hype that was going. We gave him tremendous consideration. He might be the best athlete that's ever been drafted at that position. He's arguably that. So we had to definitely consider that." End quote. That's Pete Carroll. Now, again, that was 2023. That was following the draft. And I don't think he's wrong when he says he very well could be the best athlete that's ever been drafted at that position. The question is he the best quarterback at that position? And the answer would be no. The problem with Anthony Richardson, and if you remember, and for some of you that's been listening to the show for a long time, I cover the draft really well. Go to the draft each and every year. It's probably my favorite activity all season. I like it more than going to the Super Bowl. The draft is my thing, right? I just love to be able to talk to prospects. Love the fact that, you know, every single team thinks that they're getting the next guy that's going to put their team over the top. It's just a very fun event as far as I'm considered and concerned. And I do love a lot of different events that I get to cover, and I'm blessed to cover, but the draft is definitely my favorite. In 2023, when Anthony Richardson was coming out, the biggest thing on him was he didn't have any experience. He had only started 13 games at Florida. 13. And as I know from my years now of covering the draft, talent evaluators are looking for 35, 36 career starts. Like Cam Miller, for example, has 67 career starts in college. So that's more than plenty. Now, I know he's at the FCS level, but that's still more than plenty. They got so much experience and so much film on Cam Miller, right? Anthony Richardson had no experience when he left college, and many people believe that he should have stayed in college. But as I got to talk to him, as I got to hear from people that covered him, I knew that his work ethic was a really good one. Like he was a guy, and he even talked to us when we were at the draft and said, hey, you know, I would, you know, I know I have a lot of work to do. I'm willing to put in that work and get there. And look, in 2023, the Raiders ended up taking Tyree Wilson. That was in the draft at Kansas City. They took him number 7 overall. Obviously, Anthony Richardson wasn't an option. The Colts took him at number 4 overall. Knowing he needed experience, the thing that they tried to do immediately was put him in the game. And the problem is he still hasn't gotten any experience. He still hasn't got real experience, and he's going into year 3 now. Look, so far in his career, he has played in 15 games total for 2 years. 15 games total, not in one season, in 2, right? He played in 4 games his rookie year and 11 last year. So availability is a big issue. He's had 348 passing attempts, 176 completions, 2,391 yards, a 50.6 completion percentage. For those that are trying to do the math, that's it. 11 touchdowns, 13 picks, 67.8 passer rating, 635 rushing yards, and 10 rushing touchdowns. So he gets it done there, but he's not getting it done as a quarterback. And again, the biggest thing is he's just not available. Now, his agent came out and said some stuff after he was, sent to the bench. I say sent to the bench. He's a backup quarterback. And look, remember, Daniel Jones is not an end-all, be-all. Daniel Jones has missed plenty of time with injuries as well. So there's a very good chance that Anthony Richardson doesn't get traded at all. And all of a sudden he's back into the starting lineup with the Colts by week 4 because Daniel Jones went down. But his agent made some statements that, you just really catch your attention. Following the decision to name Jones the starting quarterback, Richardson's agents reacted with disappointment in the move and said he's unsure of his client's future with the club. So whenever you say that, immediately trade. So what would it take to get Anthony Richardson? I'm not sure. I don't think he's earned a whole lot, right? I mean, I know he's a former first-round pick, so they're going to try to get try to recoup as much capital as possible if, in fact, they do trade for him, or they make him available. I just don't see, and I don't think it's a good decision for the Raiders. He still has not developed into an accurate quarterback. He still does not have that much experience. Again, 15 games played. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't come around. I mean, hell, Geno Smith is a guy that was a late bloomer, right? At first, early in his career, he wasn't very good. But Geno was a better pure passer when he was at West Virginia than Anthony Richardson, right? Geno was putting up video game type numbers at West Virginia, all right? We were talking about that at the Raiders practice facility on Tuesday between me, Vinny Bonsignor, and Levi Edwards from Raiders.com. We were just talking about those crazy numbers with Tavon Austin and remember Stedman Bailey and just that kind of like basketball on grass. I mean, they were just throwing that ball all around the yard. That's what Geno Smith brought to the table. So he's always had the talent. And I say if he got drafted maybe 4 or 5 years later than he did, then those college concepts would have been way more accepted in the National Football League. Everything after Patrick Mahomes, once Mahomes hit the league, everyone's like, oh, hey, you know what? We could do that too. But he was before Mahomes and obviously wasn't accepted as well. And it took a little while for him to evolve. And he started out with the Jets, and we all know how that goes. But again, getting back to Anthony Richardson, I know a lot of people have hit me up and said that, man, maybe the Raiders could trade Aiden O'Connell and, a later round pick and call it a day because Aiden O'Connell hasn't looked great, right? This all goes back to what we've seen so far in the preseason. I just don't see it. I don't think that he's ever going to be a franchise quarterback. I hate that for him. I don't root for anyone to lose. I just don't see the mechanics. I don't see the development. And again, worst case scenario, I don't see the availability. He's just not available. And a lot of times, even his rookie year when he only played 4 games, that's because he tried to run guys over like he did at Florida. You can't do that in the National Football League. Hell, we saw that with Ashton Genty on Saturday, right? There's certain times that you can try to run a guy over and truck him, and that's cool. And then there's other times that you just have to understand that, hey, man, I got to live to see another down, right? And especially with your franchise quarterback. Again, he's as athletic as all get out. That's what Pete Carroll alluded to when he said he may very well be the best athlete that's ever been drafted at that position. He could. Right, I remember my guy Harry Douglas from Freddie and Harry on ESPN, played in the NFL for a real long time. He said he's very Cam Newton-like, and I thought, I don't know, Cam was a pretty stinking good quarterback and thrower of the ball is what I mean, right? I mean, yeah, heck of an athlete, but man, Cam was a really good thrower of the ball, and I never saw that in Anthony Richardson. Again, I saw the work ethic. I felt like, okay, maybe there's a chance, but he definitely is a guy that should not have been drafted number 4 overall. And I remember the Raiders that year actually had interest in him, but they didn't have interest in him in the first round. And when all of a sudden he became that first round prospect based on what he did at the scouting combine, which is another reason why you shouldn't, make decisions off what you see in guys in the underwear Olympics, right? T-shirts and draws, basically, right? That's what the scouting combine is. That should just be something that checks the box, confirms what you already know. Instead, Indianapolis said, oh, man, this is going to be the next greatest thing, and it just hasn't worked out to be that. So I know that Geno Smith is not forever, right? I've had suggestions, well, why don't you just let him sit behind Geno and he can learn? Yeah, that's cool, but I just don't see that development coming. Now, somebody's going to give him a shot. Someone, and it might be Indianapolis, they might give him a shot, or it might be someone else. I just don't think that the Raiders need to go out, give up some draft capital, possibly give up a player to go get him, and then him work out to be nothing more than just an athlete. Yeah, and I know you can use him in different roles, but this guy wants to play the quarterback position. If you're going to make a move for someone that's a potential franchise quarterback, you actually want him to be the franchise quarterback. So I would pass on that if I'm John Spytek, Pete Carroll and company. Again, Pete Carroll said after 2023, we considered him. Shoot, we flew all the way out there to go see him. Not just to see him, but to be around him and watch him and how he handled himself and his program with all the hype that was going. We gave him tremendous consideration. He might be the best athlete that's ever been drafted at a position. He's arguably that, so we had to definitely consider that. Now, remember, they did not draft him. So there's that. Again, he went number 4 overall. So Indianapolis made sure that they got their guy, and they got their guy immediately. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that the Raiders should have any interest in him. They can go get their quarterback at some stage of the game. I know John Spytek likes to keep his draft capital as much as possible so he can build that way. And I think that that's the right way to do it. I don't think Anthony Richardson is the right guy. So that should be a hard pass as far as I'm concerned. But what says you? 707-654-4693. We'll hear your calls and texts. We'll close out the show. We'll hear from you next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the show, and that is Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can get extra food, drinks, merchandise, or you can invite a bigger group to go with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, great seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying tickets. And that's what I really like the most, is where you can actually see where you're going to sit before you buy the ticket. So you know what your seat looks like, right? It's not one of those where you're sitting there online, you buy the ticket, you're like, man, these are going to be some premium seats. Then you get there and you're like, oh no, I didn't account for that sitting in front of me or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to get those kind of seats where they may look good online, but they don't look good when you get there. Well, Gametime will make that not even a worry, as they've got the seat views. So before you even buy, you know what it looks like. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider fan 1972. He's calling to talk about who needs to step up this week and who he's excited about that nobody is talking about. Here he is, Raider fan 1972.
Raider fan 1972. Your question today was who needs to step up. I'm going to tell you right now, it is the cornerback room. We gave up way too many catches in that game against the 49ers. The secondary just needs to step the hell up. Now, what I would like to bring up is how good the snowman is. The snowman nobody talks about. Well, guess what? The snowman is very good, and I think you're going to see a very good year out of him this year. Thank you, Q. As always, go Raiders.
Raider fan, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, the secondary definitely needs work, right? I think that we all agree on that. The question is, who is this week going to be biggest for, right? It could be someone in that secondary. I would say it's the whole secondary, but you can't get rid of everybody. They're not all on the roster bubble right now. With that being said, that's why I brought up Caillou Blue-Kelly and Darnay Holmes. Caillou Blue-Kelly is fighting for a starting spot. Darnay Holmes, I think, is fighting for a roster spot. Right, I mean, there's a big difference in who this week is big for and why. Both guys, obviously, it's very important. So, yeah, the secondary in general, I definitely believe when they're combing the waiver wire, once they get down to the 53-man roster and there's a lot of guys released, definitely think the Raiders will bring somebody in by way of the secondary. And I agree when it comes to Charles Snowden, right? He could be in line for a big year. He looks really good. I'm really interested and intrigued in what type of suspension the league is going to drop on him from that DUI he got late last season towards the end. So that is something that, kind of when I'm putting together my 53-man roster, I'm trying to put that into consideration as well. Is he going to be available for the beginning of the season, or is he going to have a couple game suspension? That's definitely something to think about. But thanks so much for the call. Do appreciate you. Up next, got a text, pretty lengthy one here, from Pitmaster Raider in Idaho. Hey, Q, it's Pitmaster Raider here from Idaho. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about with the backup quarterback position in O'Connell. He didn't look fabulous. No, you're right. However, I watched the game again last night, and he only played with the 2s and 3s on the line, and most of the receivers, he's not getting the opportunity to play with the 1s. He got ate up by the weak play of the 2s and 3s on the offensive line, and we had several drops from our backup receivers as well. Yes, I'll agree with you. There is no quarterback controversy on who the starter is. Geno definitely looks better. He doesn't look like Joe Burrow or anything, but he's definitely the number 1 quarterback. Aiden O'Connell will be fine. Put him in with the ones, and you'll see a completely different quarterback. There's definitely not a controversy on who the backup is, and it would be insane to give up a solid backup in O'Connell and only rely on Cam Miller as our backup. Then he goes on to say, I think we look pretty good minus a deep secondary. I think we're really weak on our secondary and may need to address that, but we'll see what happens when the full season starts because you really just can't tell until we get out there and see the full offense and the full defense and real competition. The exhibition season, and yes, I call it the exhibition season, is only about getting the twos some work and seeing the guys who are on the bubble and helping make decisions with that. I think we're going to be good this year. I think we've got a low bar of 8 to 10 wins, but I think we have the potential of hitting 12 wins this season. Appreciate the vine. Let's go Raiders. That's Pitmaster Raider in Idaho. Thanks for the text. Appreciate you. We'll start off with the backup quarterback. Yeah, I don't think there's any controversy. Aiden O'Connell clearly is the backup quarterback, but I think we'd be lying to each other if we said he looked comfortable. He doesn't look like he's a very good fit in this Chip Kelly offense. With that being said, some of that is the reasons that you brought up, what's around him, the offensive line, some of the weapons, right? I don't think he trusts the offensive line because, well, they're not protecting very good, and that makes a lot of sense. But he's also still making the mistakes he made early in his career where he's staring down wide receivers. That is a fact. That's something that you can't deny. He's absolutely doing that. So that's a problem as well. You can't do that. And as Pete Carroll pointed out on Sunday, he said that the offense slows down when Aiden O'Connell's out there, and they've got to find a way to speed that up. So that's not my words. That's the head coach. And I defer to him because I think that he knows what he's looking for a little bit more than me. As far as the secondary and the rest of the roster, yeah, I think we're all in agreement with the secondary that it's still a work in progress. And I'm sure that a few of the guys that are going to get action for the Raiders in 2025 aren't even currently on the Raiders roster. Thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Windy City Raider. He's calling to give a nickname to Ashton Genty, a nickname that he feels he's already earned, and why. Here he is, Windy City Raider.
You, Windy City Raider. It's been a minute since I called in. Thanks for all the work that you continue to put into the show. So I've got an idea for a nickname for Genty that I think is on point. He isn't the GOAT just yet, but he is the Yak. YAC, yards after contact. We saw it in the second preseason game. There's the highlight of him knocking the defender on his backside, and then on his touchdown run, he was carrying people with him. And I know I've heard this stat before, and I might have even heard it from you, but it is so ridiculous that I can't really believe it's true. But if you were to only count the yards after contact that Ashton had his senior year at Boise State, he still would have led the nation in rushing. And I'm looking at the stats. It seems right, but it also seems impossible. But I am looking forward to watching that guy drag defenders downfield. And I'm psyched for the Yak era. So, all right, Q, excited for the season. And let's go Raiders.
Windy City, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, Yak is a good one, right? Yards after contact. And that's what he specialized in college, right? The stat that you're reading and when referencing, yeah, that's correct. 1,889 yards after contact. Think about that. He had 1,889 yards in 2024 after contact. Now, that's a season that went over 2,600 total yards. So he was getting hit pretty early. But, man, that is absolute domination. So, yeah, if you want to call him Yak, the Yak Man, the Yak Monster, right? Yakety Yak, whatever you want to call him, you're not wrong. Yards after contact is definitely Ashton Genty. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a text from Paige from East PA. Why is Cam Miller not the second string? Tom Brady handpicked him. Please elaborate on your opinion on Cam. I really think he's our diamond in the rough. I heard a comment on your show the other day about a 3-year plan to the Super Bowl from Raider 1972. I think this kid may be the key to this becoming that reality. Much love, Q. Just win, baby. That's Paige from East PA. Yeah, and Paige, thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Cam Miller's not the number 2 quarterback because he's still got a long way to go. Cam Miller is still young. He's a 6th-round pick. He comes from the FCS level. He's a guy that has plenty of experience. That's great, but he's got to learn the NFL game. He did play good in limited time in preseason game number 1, and then when he got in preseason game number 2, you saw him be a rookie. If the Raiders were to go, like if Geno Smith were to go down and Cam Miller was the only backup quarterback that they had, they'd be in trouble, right? At least Aiden O'Connell, even though he doesn't look great right now, he doesn't look comfortable in Chip Kelly's offense. He still makes a few of the mistakes that he made early in his career. He has starting experience. He's won games. He's the best option right now at the number 2 quarterback. I'm not saying that's going to be the case next year. That's why I have on my, my 53-man roster that I put together, I have the Raiders keeping 3 quarterbacks. because I do believe that they like Cam Miller. I know that, you said Tom Brady handpicked him. I know those reports are out there. I haven't heard Tom Brady say that. So right now that's just kind of speculation, but I understand, like I said, a lot of people have said that, but Tom Brady hasn't told us that. So we don't know 100%. But I do believe Cam Miller has a little something, and I think a lot of people like him, but he has to keep on growing. And I think the best thing for him to be is a number 3 quarterback, so he has time to grow without having the pressure of, oh, man, he's got to figure it out right away because they might need him if Geno goes down. If Geno goes down, the Raiders could be in trouble this season, right? And so obviously you don't want to have to defer to your backup quarterback, but Cam Miller is definitely not ready to be the backup quarterback just yet. So thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Heavy D. He's calling from Bills country. He's calling to ask a question about the trade of Jacorian Bennett, and he needs some answers. Here he is, Heavy D.
Hey, Q and Raider Nation. This is Heavy D calling from the heart of Bills country. Q, you are our man on the inside, and I'm calling today. If you'll kindly take the call and maybe give us a little intel if you have some. You were the first guy that told us that Alex Leatherwood might get cut, and I didn't believe it. And it turned out, with your ear to the ground, you knew what was up. Do you know anything about the Jacorian Bennett trade and why it might have gone down? Because I'm looking at our QB situation, or not QB, cornerback situation, and it doesn't look good. And did my eyeballs lie to me last year? Did the PFF grades lie to me last year? He was a good player. Were they unhappy about how his rehab was going? Was he not in the building enough? Did he have a poor attitude? Is there anything you've heard on your end? Because it's making, as I'm watching our cornerbacks play in the preseason in the wide open middle of the field, it just makes less and less sense to me. If you would have told me a while ago that Kai Blue Kelly would be number 1 on the depth chart, taking the rest of the ones, I'd say we're in serious trouble. With Gruden and McDaniels and these guys that took over, a pet peeve of mine is like adhering to your system and not being rigid. And I've mostly loved Pete and Spytech so far, but the whole thing, the whole idea that, he just wasn't a Pete type of corner, I feel like there's got to be more to the story. He's just too short, so now you're running with the 2s, and now you're running with the 3s. So I guess my question is, Q, do you know of anything? Because it's not making any sense to me. And if Jacorian balls out this year and we're struggling at corner, this is going to be a head scratcher for a while. So maybe you got intel that we don't have. Q, love the work, love the hustle. Raider Nation, have a great day.
It's the overweight lover, Heavy D. Man, that's all I ever think of whenever. Heavy D was one of my favorite rappers from back in the day, man. Rest in peace to Heavy D, but man, Heavy D and the boys. I know I say it every time you call in, so sorry that I keep getting the same story, but thanks for the call. Appreciate you. Look, I don't know a lot about the Jacorian Bennett trade. Anyone who listened to this show knows that JB was my guy. I had a really good relationship with him. He had a really good 2024. Your eyes were not deceiving you. Only problem with him is he wasn't able to finish 2024. He got banged up. He got injured, went on IR, and that's kind of been what his career has been so far, right? As a 4th-round pick out of Maryland, he just had, nicks and bruises, bumps and bruises here and there, and wasn't able to participate. Looked like his rookie year, he didn't have a lot of confidence, but last year looked really good until he had to go out. So, scheme fit. His attitude always seemed to be great. It was always great with us, right? Anytime I talked with him, he had a, real big smile on his face. He always seemed to be that guy, but for some reason, and I'm sure something will come out sooner rather than later and we'll get some more answers. But honestly, if I knew, I would tell you. I don't. I've reached out to him, tried to, get a few words from him since he got traded, but I haven't heard anything back. And I mean, that's not a big surprise. That's how these kind of things go at times. So hopefully, like I said, we'll hear some and get some clarity at some point. But right now, I'd be lying to you if I gave you any real concrete, this is the reason why he got traded. So thanks so much for the call. It's always good to hear from you. We'll close things out with a text from Rum Runner in the 804. It says, hey, Q, Rum Runner here in the 804. What is your take on why we are dragging our feet on extending Jacoby Myers? Jacoby is a loyal Raider through and through and deserves to get paid. I'm scratching my head on why the team is dragging things out. Just curious on your take. Thanks as always for keeping us Nation faithful in the know. Appreciate you. That's Rum Runner in the 804. And look, there's a couple of reasons. I do think that they're working on it. From everything I've heard, they're working on Jacoby's deal. But John Spytek also comes from the Jason Light tree there in Tampa Bay, and they take their time. They took their time with Colton Miller. And Colton Miller, you want to talk about a Raider through and through? He's a Raider through and through. They took their time with it. They got it done. Daniel Carlson is another guy I would expect that they're going to get a deal done with him sooner rather than later, but that hasn't happened yet. But I do believe they're working on a deal for Jacoby. He's done everything the right way, right? He showed up to OTAs. He showed up to mandatory minicamp. He didn't try to hold out. He's not complaining in the media. He's just going out there doing his job. So I do think something will happen sooner rather than later, but I don't know what's actually taking so long. I want to ask him at practice, but I don't like getting people's business and just be like, hey, man, is there a deal coming soon? I mean, he's been asked a couple times, and he just, always says that that's for the guys upstairs and his agent to work on. And obviously he wants to be there, but he wants to be there as much as the Raiders want him to be there. So, you take that for what it's worth. Clearly, he wants to get a deal done. He's in the last year of his deal, and I think he's done everything that the Raiders have asked him and probably a little bit more since he's been a member of the Silver and Black. And anyone who listens to this show knows that just like Jacorian Bennett, I'm a big Jacoby Myers guy as well. A big fan of him, big fan of his family. He just does things the right way, and I can appreciate that. So if anyone's rooting for him to get that contract extension, it's definitely me. Remember last year, I was rooting for him to get 1,000 yards? Now I'm rooting for him to get that contract extension. So thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Got a call from Darren in the 203 we'll get to tomorrow. A text from Nick in Orange County. Plus, we'll have more feedback. We get to meet with head coach Pete Carroll following practice coming up today. Be back out there for a couple more days. Looking forward to practice and this game coming up on Saturday. And then next week, the 53-man roster and also the practice squad. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.